My husband left me for a younger woman on Christmas Eve. A few hours later, I was sitting on a frozen bench, shaking from the cold, when I noticed a barefoot man nearby, his skin turning blue from the freezing air. I slipped off my winter boots and gave them to him. 2 hours later, 17 black SUVs pulled up around me. The same man stepped out, looked at me calmly, and said something I will never forget. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far it reaches. My name is Claudia, and I thought I understood heartbreak long before December 24th, 2024. I had buried my mother, survived the pressure of nursing school, and spent decades caring for patients through long nights, knowing some of them would never make it home. But none of that compared to the moment my husband's voice, distant and emotionless, ended our 28-year marriage with a few carefully chosen sentences. "I can't do this anymore, Claudia." Trent stood in our kitchen wearing his gray wool coat, snow melting on his shoulders. He didn't even take off his shoes. The smell of cinnamon from the apple pie I'd spent the entire afternoon baking filled the room, making his words feel even colder. I dried my hands on the red and green dish towel we had used every Christmas since our second year of marriage. "Do what?" "You just got home. Sit down. I'll make you some coffee." He shook his head. I noticed the extra gray in his hair, the deeper lines around his eyes. At 57, he was still handsome to me, still the man I fell in love with when I was 27 and believed forever was guaranteed. "I can't pretend anymore," he said, placing his keys on the counter as if he'd practiced the motion. "I haven't been happy for a long time." The towel slipped from my hands. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. The same instinct I'd relied on for 30 years as a nurse, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "What are you talking about? We were opening gifts tomorrow morning. You said you got me something special." My voice sounded unfamiliar, higher, strained. Trent finally looked at me, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my legs feel weak. It wasn't anger, it wasn't guilt, it was pity. The kind of look you give someone you've already decided to leave behind. "There's someone else, Claudia." The words lingered in the air. I grabbed the edge of the counter, my fingers pressing into the cold granite we'd chosen together during the kitchen remodel 3 years earlier. I'd wanted marble. Trent said granite was more sensible. Sensible had become the theme of our life. "Someone else," I repeated softly. "Her name is Jessica." He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "She's 28. The number hit me like a blow. 28, the same age I was when I married him. I sank onto a stool, my legs refusing to hold me up. "How long?" 8 months. 8 months while I planned our anniversary dinner. 8 months while I wrapped his Christmas gifts. 8 months while I slept beside him every night, trusting him completely. "She makes me feel young again," he continued, and I realized he'd rehearsed this. These words weren't spontaneous, they were prepared. "She laughs at my jokes. She wants to try new things, travel, explore. With me, everything is so—" "What?" I asked quietly. "Predictable, safe, old." The word stuck in my throat. I thought about my body, the years visible in fine lines, in softness, in the gray hair I'd started coloring 2 years ago. Then I thought about Jessica, 28, glowing with possibility. "I understand." I stood up, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "When are you leaving?" "Tonight. I've already moved most of my things to her place. I just came back to—" He gestured around the house, at the Christmas tree, the photos lining the walls, nearly 3 decades of shared memories. "To tell you." "How thoughtful," I said. "Waiting until Christmas Eve." He looked uncomfortable. I wanted to wait until after the holidays, but she said it wasn't fair to keep pretending. A woman half my age had been deciding the fate of my marriage, and I hadn't even known she existed. "The house is in both our names," I said, surprised by my calm. "We'll need to talk about it." "Keep it," he replied quickly. "I don't want to argue over things. I just want to be happy, as if happiness could only exist at the cost of someone else's life, as if our 28 years together meant nothing." I walked to the window and watched the snow fall over our neighborhood. Every house glowed with warm lights, families gathered inside, laughing, sharing dinner, living the life I thought I still had. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. "Did you ever love me?" I asked without turning around. The silence stretched on so long that I began to think he wouldn't answer at all. Then he finally spoke, his voice softer than it had been all evening. He said he did love me, but people change. He said he had changed. I turned to face him one last time. He stood by the door with his keys in his hand, already halfway out of our life. Somehow he looked lighter, almost younger, as if saying the truth had lifted something heavy from him. "I hope she makes you happy, Trent. I really do." He blinked, clearly caught off guard. Maybe he expected tears or anger or pleas to stay. A month earlier, he might have gotten all of that. But standing there in our kitchen, surrounded by the remains of a life I thought was unbreakable, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Not the kind that comes with good news, but the quiet relief of finally understanding something that had confused me for a long time. "Claudia, I should just go," I said softly. "Please, just go." After he left, I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the silence settle in. The house felt impossibly large, every room filled with echoes of memories that would never feel the same again. I walked through the living room, past the Christmas tree with the gifts I had wrapped so carefully, past the mantel where our wedding photos smiled back at a marriage that no longer existed. I took my winter coat from the closet and wrapped my blue wool scarf around my neck, the one my mother had knitted for me before she passed away. Then I stepped outside into the night. The snow was falling harder now, covering everything in clean white, as if trying to erase what had come before. I had nowhere to go and no one to call. Our friends had always been couples, and I couldn't face explaining what had happened. My sister lived in California, and it was too late to call her. I was alone in a way I had never been before, not even after my mother's funeral. So I walked, past neat houses glowing with warm lights, past the elementary school where I had volunteered for years, past the church where Trent and I had been married on a bright June morning, back when we believed love alone was enough to last forever. The snow soaked through my boots and my feet slowly went numb, but I kept moving. I needed to feel something other than the empty ache in my chest. The streets were silent. Everyone else was inside with their families, warm and safe. Eventually, I reached Memorial Park, where Trent and I used to bring picnics during the early years of our marriage. A bench near the pond was half buried in snow. I brushed it off and sat down. The metal was so cold it burned through my jeans, but I didn't care. I sat there as the snow fell and finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. 28 years of marriage, gone. The future I had planned, erased. The man I loved had been living another life, and I had trusted him completely. But as I sat there, something unexpected stirred beneath the pain and shock. It took me a moment to recognize it. Freedom. For the first time in decades, there was no one to cook for, no schedule to coordinate, no needs to put ahead of my own. The thought scared me and thrilled me at the same time. The snow kept falling, and I pulled my scarf tighter. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang midnight. Christmas Day had arrived, and I was alone on a park bench. My marriage was over, my future uncertain, and somehow I was still breathing. I must have sat there for more than an hour, watching the snow fall and feeling sorry for myself. The cold had worked its way through my coat and into my bones. My fingers were numb even inside my gloves, and I could no longer feel my toes. Still, I couldn't bring myself to get up and return to the empty house that no longer felt like home. The park was completely deserted. Who else would be out in weather like this on Christmas morning? The streetlights cast small pools of yellow light, and beyond them everything dissolved into white silence. Even the usual city sounds were muted by the heavy snow. I was just starting to think I should head back, when I heard something that made me lift my head. Footsteps, uneven and slow, coming from the main path. I squinted through the snowfall and saw a figure approaching, moving carefully. As he came closer, I could see he was a man in his 60s, wearing several worn layers that had seen better days. His gray hair was messy, his beard untrimmed, and his steps were unsteady. But what stopped me cold was his feet. He was barefoot. In the freezing snow, with the temperature far below comfortable, this man was walking without shoes or socks. His feet were so red they looked almost purple under the streetlights, and every step clearly hurt. My nursing instincts took over immediately. In these conditions, this was dangerous. He needed warmth, and he needed it fast. I stood up from the bench, my own pain suddenly feeling very small. "Sir, are you okay?" He stopped and looked at me with clear surprise, as if he hadn't even noticed I was there. His eyes were a striking blue, sharp and thoughtful, completely at odds with his worn, untidy appearance. "Just trying to find somewhere warm," he said. His voice was rough, likely from the cold. "Shelters are all full on Christmas Eve. The holiday spirit only goes so far." I glanced down at his feet again and felt my stomach tighten. His toes were no longer just red. They were turning white, which was far more dangerous. "Your feet. You need help. That looks like frostbite." He looked down at them with detached curiosity. "Yeah. Lost my shoes a couple of days ago. Someone took them while I was sleeping. Funny thing about being homeless, you learn people will steal anything, even from someone who has nothing." My chest ached. I'd been drowning in self-pity over my husband choosing someone younger, while this man was literally freezing on the street. I looked at my own feet, warm and dry inside sturdy brown leather boots. Good boots, waterproof, insulated. I'd bought them just last month after Trent complained my old ones looked worn. Without thinking, I sat back down on the bench and started untying my laces. "What are you doing?" he asked, stepping closer. "Taking off my boots," I said, pulling one free. The cold hit my sock immediately, sharp and biting, but I ignored it and reached for the second. "Lady, you can't do that. You'll freeze." I held both boots in my hands and looked up at him. "You won't make it if you keep walking barefoot in this weather. I'll manage. I've got thick socks and I don't live far." It wasn't true. The walk home would take at least 20 minutes, but as I looked at his feet, I knew I couldn't walk away and live with myself. He stared at me, clearly torn between pride and desperation. "I can't take your boots. That's not right." "My name is Claudia," I said, standing and holding them out to him. "And it's Christmas morning. Let me do one good thing today, please." Something in my voice must have reached him. Slowly, he took the boots. His hands trembled, whether from the cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "And thank you. You have no idea what this means." I watched as he sat down and pulled on the boots. They were a bit big, but they worked. The relief on his face when his feet were finally warm was worth every cold step I knew I'd have to take later. "Are you really sure?" he asked, standing and testing them. "Once you walk away, you probably won't see these again." I smiled, surprised by how unfamiliar it felt after such a long night. "I'm sure. My mother always said that if you expect something back, you're not helping. You're bargaining." Marcus studied me with those piercing blue eyes, like he was truly seeing me. Maybe the first person who had in years. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She was. She passed away 5 years ago, but I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me to do the right thing even when it's hard. I hugged myself, partly for warmth, partly because talking about her always made me feel exposed. "What are you doing out here on Christmas morning?" Marcus asked gently. "Most people are with their families." I laughed, though there was no joy in it. "My husband left me tonight. Well, last night now. For someone younger, I didn't really have anywhere else to go." His expression softened. "I'm sorry. That's a hard night for that to happen." "Could be worse," I said, looking at him. "I could be homeless and barefoot in a snowstorm." That made him smile. A real smile, one that transformed his entire face. "You're right. Still, heartbreak has its own kind of cold, doesn't it?" "It does," I said, surprised by how perfectly he'd put it. We stood there quietly, two hurting people brought together by chance and snow. Then Marcus reached into one of his pockets and pulled out something small and metallic. "I want you to have this," he said, holding out a simple silver coin. "It's not worth much, but it's all I have." I took it, feeling its warmth in my palm. There was an inscription, but it was too dark to read. "Thank you," I said, "but you don't need to give me anything." "Yes, I do," he replied firmly. "You gave me something precious when you didn't have to. I need to give something back, even if it's small." Touched, I slipped the coin into my coat pocket. "Where will you go now?" "There's a diner about 6 blocks from here that stays open all night. If I make it that far, I can sit there until morning. Maybe get some coffee." He looked down at the boots again. "Thanks to you, I actually have a chance." "Be careful," I said sincerely. "And Marcus? I hope things get better for you." "They already have," he said. "And Claudia, don't forget this. You're worth more than anyone who walks away for someone younger. Sometimes the people who hurt us end up giving us the biggest gift of all, even if they never mean to." Before I could reply, he turned and walked off, his steps steady now in my boots. I watched until he disappeared into the falling snow, and then I was alone again. The walk home was miserable. Snow soaked through my socks almost immediately, and after just a couple of blocks, I couldn't feel my feet at all. And yet, inside, I felt warmer than I had all night. For the first time since Trent walked out, I had done something that mattered. Something simple, honest, and right. I kept replaying Marcus's words in my head, that sometimes the people who hurt us end up helping us without even realizing it. Maybe he was right. Maybe Trent leaving wasn't the end of my life, but the beginning of something I couldn't see yet. When I finally reached the house, I ran a hot bath and soaked my frozen feet until the feeling slowly came back. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, still in my wet clothes, trying to absorb everything that had happened. The silver coin Marcus had given me rested on the counter beside my mug. Under the light, I could finally read the inscription. "Kindness is the only investment that never fails." I turned the coin over in my fingers, thinking about the strange man who spoke like a philosopher and carried words like that in his pocket. There had been something about him that didn't quite match his appearance. The way he spoke, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, even the way he carried himself when the pain wasn't slowing him down. But in the end, it didn't matter who he was or where he came from. What mattered was that I had helped someone who needed it. And in doing so, he had reminded me that I still had worth, even if my husband couldn't see it anymore. I finished my tea and finally went to bed, my thoughts drifting between blue eyes, silver coins, and the quiet comfort I'd found in giving my boots to a stranger. For the first time in hours, sleep came easily. I dreamed of warmth, gentle words, and the possibility that tomorrow might be better than today. I had no idea that less than 48 hours later, my life would change in ways I never could have imagined. 2 days passed after that snowy Christmas morning, and I started to wonder if I'd dreamed the whole thing. The coin on my nightstand was the only proof Marcus had been real. I spent most of the day after Christmas wrapped in pajamas, moving between tears over my broken marriage and numb thoughts about what to do next. The house felt different with Trent gone. Not just quiet, but hollow. Every room held memories that now felt false, and I avoided the places where we'd once been happiest. The kitchen where we cooked together, the living room where we watched movies, the bedroom I couldn't bring myself to enter. I made a small nest on the living room couch, piling blankets around me with tissues and the remote. Daytime television played in the background, meaningless noise meant to fill the silence before it swallowed me whole. It was just after 2 in the afternoon when I heard a sound that didn't belong. At first I thought it was thunder, but the rumble was too steady, too mechanical. I muted the TV and listened. Engines. More than one. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and shuffled to the front window, expecting to see a delivery truck or maybe the snowplow. Instead, my breath caught. 17 black SUVs were pulling up to my house in perfect formation, like a scene from a movie. They lined both sides of the street, identical and spotless despite the slushy roads, their windows so dark I couldn't see inside. My first thought was that there had to be a mistake. Maybe they were looking for someone else nearby. Maybe it was some operation that had nothing to do with me. Then the doors began to open. Men in black suits stepped out, moving with calm precision. They didn't rush the house or act aggressively. Instead, they positioned themselves along the street, evenly spaced, like some kind of honor guard. Their presence was deliberate and impossible to ignore. My heart pounded as I stepped back from the window. This couldn't be about me. I was a 55-year-old retired nurse. I didn't know anyone important enough for this kind of attention. The doorbell rang and I nearly jumped. I crept back to the window and looked out carefully. One man stood alone on my porch, wearing the same black suit as the others, but somehow looking less intimidating. He was turned away, yet something about his posture felt familiar. When he turned around, I gasped. It was Marcus, but not the Marcus I'd met in the park. This Marcus was clean-shaven, his gray hair neatly styled, dressed in an unmistakably expensive suit. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not sleeping on a park bench. With shaking hands, I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to look out. Marcus. He smiled, the same warm smile from Christmas morning. "Hello, Claudia. May I come in? I think we should talk." I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. "I don't understand. You said you were homeless." "I was testing something," he said gently. "Testing whether real kindness still exists. Whether there are people who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return." He gestured toward the line of SUVs outside. "You passed that test in a way I never expected." I opened the door wider, clutching the blanket around me like armor. "Who are you?" "Really?" "My name is Marcus Wellington," he said as he stepped inside. "I own Wellington Industries. You may have heard of us." I had. Even I knew that name. They owned skyscrapers across the city and invested in everything from technology to renewable energy. The man standing in my living room wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful. He was one of the richest people in the country. "You're a billionaire," I said weakly, sinking onto the couch as the reality hit me. $3.7 billion, according to the latest estimates, he replied with a small, almost embarrassed smile. "But that's not why I'm here." I stared at him, trying to connect this calm, impeccably dressed man with the barefoot stranger I'd met in the snow. "I gave you my boots, my $20 boots from Target. The most valuable gift anyone has given me in years," Marcus said. He sat across from me, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Claudia, may I tell you why I was really in that park?" I nodded, afraid my voice might fail me. 6 months ago, my wife passed away after a long illness. We were married for 32 years. She was everything to me. His voice tightened, though he kept it steady. The service was overwhelming. So many people came, most of them barely knowing her. They offered sympathy while quietly thinking about how her absence might change their relationship with me. He looked down at his hands. In the weeks that followed, I realized I no longer knew who my real friends were. Everyone wanted something: money, access, influence. I started wondering if anyone would help Marcus Wellington if he weren't Marcus Wellington. I felt my chest tighten. "I think I understand." "So I decided to find out," he said. "For months I've gone out like that, different neighborhoods, different nights, watching how people treat someone they believe has nothing to offer. Most walked past me like I didn't exist. Some were openly cruel. A few offered spare change or directions to a shelter, which was kind. But..." He paused and looked directly at me. "You were the first person who gave me something you actually needed, something that caused you real discomfort to give away. They were just boots," I said quietly. "No, they weren't. You were sitting alone in the snow, clearly dealing with your own pain, and you still noticed someone worse off than you. You didn't ask for explanations. You didn't judge. You didn't ask me to prove I deserved help. You simply acted." Tears blurred my vision. "I couldn't just leave you there." "Most people could have," Marcus said softly. "Most people did." He reached into his jacket and pulled out my brown leather boots. I had them cleaned and treated. I was hoping you'd let me give them back. I took them, running my fingers over the leather. "They looked better than the day I bought them. You didn't have to do this." Yes, I did. And Claudia, I didn't come only to return your boots. I came to offer you something. I looked up, confused. What could you possibly offer me? I don't need charity. He smiled gently. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a job. A job? I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. I'm a retired nurse. What could I do for someone like you? The Wellington Foundation is our charitable arm, he explained. We donate around $200 million a year to shelters, education, medical research, and disaster relief. Right now, it's managed by people who understand finances very well, but they've never truly understood what it means to need help. He studied my face carefully. What I learned about you in those few minutes at the park told me more about your character than years of resumes ever could. You have something that can't be taught and can't be bought, real compassion and the courage to act on it. You want me to work for your foundation? I want you to help me rebuild it. Make it something real, something that truly changes lives. I've been thinking about this nonstop since Christmas morning. What if the person guiding our giving actually understood vulnerability? Someone who spent a lifetime caring for people, not spreadsheets. My thoughts spun. I don't have experience in this field. I wouldn't even know where to begin. You'd learn and you wouldn't be alone. I'd work alongside you. This matters to me. He hesitated, then added, the position pays $120,000 a year, full benefits, and a housing allowance if you choose to move closer to our offices. The number echoed in my head, more than I'd ever earned. Enough to stand on my own without fear or dependence. Why me? I asked softly. You could choose anyone. Because others would see this as a role. For you, helping people is part of who you are. Marcus stood, straightening his jacket. I don't need an answer today. You've been through enough. Take your time. He handed me a business card. My personal number is on it. Call me when you're ready, whether the answer is yes or no. I took the card, my hands trembling. The heavy paper read, Marcus Wellington, CEO, Wellington Industries. I have one question, I said, as he reached for the door. Of course. That coin you gave me, the one about kindness being an investment that never fails, did you make it for your test? Marcus paused. When he turned back, his eyes shone. No, he said quietly. That was my wife's. She carried it with her everywhere. He said it reminded her why we were put on this earth. I've carried that coin with me ever since she passed, and I've never given it to anyone else. Marcus smiled gently. She would have liked you, Claudia. She would have said you're exactly the kind of person the world needs more of. After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, holding the business card and staring out at the empty street where 17 black SUVs had been parked just minutes earlier. Everything felt unreal, like I'd fallen asleep with the television on and slipped into the most vivid dream of my life. But the boots beside me were real, and so was the card in my hand. I thought about Marcus's offer, about the possibility of starting over completely. For 28 years, I had defined myself as Trent's wife. Before that, I was a nurse, caring for others within systems someone else had designed. Now, for the first time, I was being offered a chance to build something new. Something meaningful, to take everything I knew about compassion and use it on a scale I had never imagined. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. When I saw Trent's name on the screen, my instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. Claudia, he said, his voice tight, I need to talk to you. Can I come over? I looked around the living room at the blankets and tissues, then at the business card that represented a future I'd never dared to picture. Actually, Trent, I said calmly, surprising myself, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not ready to talk to you, but I've been thinking, so have I interrupted. And right now, I need to focus on what comes next for me. On my own. I hung up before he could reply. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt something stir that might have been hope. The business card stayed on my kitchen table for 3 days, bright white against the worn wood, like a doorway to another life. I picked it up countless times, tracing the raised letters, memorizing Marcus Wellington's number without even trying. $120,000 a year. The figure echoed in my head. Enough to travel, to buy a new home, to stop worrying about every unexpected expense. But more than the money, it was the sense of purpose that kept me awake at night. I had spent 30 years as a nurse, and I loved it. Still, I had always worked inside systems built by others, following rules written by people I never met. Marcus was offering me the chance to create something from the ground up, to use everything I'd learned about people, pain, and healing in a completely new way. Then doubt crept in. What did I know about running a foundation? What if I failed? What if Marcus realized he'd made a mistake? What if this was all too good to be real? I was caught in those thoughts when the doorbell rang on Thursday afternoon. Expecting a grocery delivery, I opened the door without checking first. Trent stood on my porch holding a bouquet of roses and wearing that familiar, apologetic look from the early years of our marriage, back when he'd forgotten an anniversary or missed an important dinner. "Hi, Claudia. You look—" He stopped, taking me in. I was in old jeans and a worn sweater, my hair pulled back messily. "You look tired." "I've been better," I said, not stepping aside. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to talk, to explain. He held out the flowers. "I brought these for you, your favorites." I looked at the roses and noted they were red. My favorites were pink. After 28 years, he still didn't know the difference. "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "Please, Claudia. Just 5 minutes. There are things you need to know about Jessica, about why you had an affair for 8 months, I cut in. Why you waited until Christmas Eve to tell me. Why you threw away nearly 3 decades of marriage for someone half your age. My voice surprised us both with its strength. "I don't need explanations, Trent. I need you to leave." But he wasn't listening. His eyes drifted past me into the house, widening as he took in the changes I'd made. I'd rearranged the living room, moved his favorite chair into the garage, and replaced it with a small desk where I'd been researching the Wellington Foundation. Books on nonprofit leadership and charitable strategy were spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" he asked, stepping closer. "It's none of your business," I said, but I saw his instincts kick in, the same ones that always surfaced when he sensed control slipping away. "Are you going back to school?" "Claudia, you're 55. Don't you think you're a little old to be starting over?" The words hit me hard. Too old to start over. And in that moment, Marcus's words came back to me. Sometimes the people who hurt us end up doing us the greatest favor without ever meaning to. Hearing the way Trent dismissed my potential so casually made something snap into place inside me. "I think," I said slowly, "that 55 is exactly the right age to stop letting other people decide what I'm capable of." His expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Look, I know you're upset and you have every right to be, but Jessica and it's not working out the way I thought it would." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "Are you telling me you want to come back?" "I'm saying I made a mistake. A big one." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found charming but now just looked worn. "She's not who I thought she was. She's demanding. She expects me to pay for everything. And when I told her I couldn't afford the lifestyle she wanted, she started seeing someone else." I looked at him with a mix of disbelief and pity. "So you're here because your 28-year-old girlfriend left you for someone with more money?" "I'm here because I finally realized what I had with you, what I threw away." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We had something real, Claudia. Something stable." "Stable," I repeated quietly. "Is that how you describe 28 years of marriage?" "You know what I mean. We were good together. We understood each other. We could be again." I really looked at him then and realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't offering love or growth or a future built on respect. He was offering comfort, familiarity, a return to a life where I fit neatly into a role that required very little of him. "Tell me something, Trent," I said. "In all the years we were married, did you ever once tell anyone I was remarkable? Did you ever brag about me or talk about my achievements with pride?" He looked confused. "Of course I was proud of you. You were a good nurse, a good wife, A good wife, I repeated. Not an extraordinary woman, not an impressive human being, just a good wife. Like something that functioned properly. That's not fair, Claudia. You're twisting my words, am I? I thought of Marcus, of the way he looked at me in the park when I offered him my boots, like he'd witnessed something meaningful. When was the last time you saw me as anything other than your wife? When was the last time you cared about what I wanted for myself? Trent opened his mouth, then closed it. We both knew he didn't have an answer. I've been offered a job, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. A serious job, with responsibility, and a salary nearly twice what you make. His eyes narrowed. What kind of job? That's not the point. The point is that someone sees me as capable of more than just being your wife. Claudia, be realistic. Who's hiring a 55-year-old nurse for a high-paying position? It's probably a scam. There it was again. The quiet dismissal, the assumption that I couldn't possibly be worth more than he'd decided I was. But this time, it didn't shrink me. It clarified everything. You're right, Trent, I said calmly. I am being unrealistic. It's unrealistic to think that someone who lied to me for 8 months could suddenly understand my value. I stepped back and began to close the door. Wait. No. We're done. We've been done since Christmas Eve. I just didn't have the clarity to see it yet. You did me a favor by leaving, and I'm not going to waste it by taking you back. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening as he called my name a few more times before giving up. Through the window, I watched him get into his car and drive away, likely heading back to whatever temporary arrangement he'd made after things fell apart with Jessica. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt grateful to him. His assumption that I should be thankful for his willingness to return showed me exactly why I needed to say yes to the opportunity Marcus had offered. Before I could lose my nerve, I picked up the business card and dialed the number. Marcus Wellington's office, a professional voice answered. This is Claudia Hayes. I'd like to speak with Mr. Wellington, please. One moment. The hold music lasted barely 10 seconds before Marcus came on the line. Claudia, I was hoping you'd call. I've been thinking about your offer, I said, pacing my kitchen, and I have some questions. Ask me anything. First, are you absolutely sure about this? I've spent the last 3 days researching nonprofit work, and I'm realizing how much I don't know. Marcus laughed softly. I'm more certain now than I was when I first offered. What else? If I take this job and I'm terrible at it, will you let me go? If that happens, I'll make sure you have every bit of training and support you need to succeed. But Claudia, I don't think you fully understand what you showed me that night in the park. What do you mean? Most people with your background would have walked right past me. Most people with advanced degrees in this field would have done the same, but you didn't hesitate. You saw a need and acted, without weighing what it would cost you. That isn't something you can teach. That's character. Tears filled my eyes. But for the first time in days, they weren't born from pain. They came from something far better. When would you need an answer? He asked. When am I ready to give one? I looked around my kitchen, at the house that had once been my entire world, at the life I'd built and watched collapse because of someone else's choices. Then I thought about Marcus's wife, about that silver coin, and her belief that kindness was the one investment that never failed. I'm ready now, I said. Yes, I want to do this. Are you sure? I smiled, feeling a spark of excitement rise inside me for the first time in years, I'm sure. When do I start? How about Monday? He paused. My assistant will send you everything you need. The first week will be about orientation, learning how things work, meeting the team, understanding our current programs. Okay, Marcus. Thank you. Thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't even know was there. And thank you, he replied softly, for reminding me that there are still people in this world worth trusting. After I hung up, I stayed in my kitchen for a long time, my eyes drifting to the roses Trent had left on the porch. They were already wilting in the cold, petals browning at the edges. But beyond them, through the bare branches of the trees, I could see tiny buds forming, signs of spring, of what was coming next. I realized I had a choice. I could bring those roses inside, try to save them, pretend they were still beautiful, or I could leave them where they were and focus on what lay ahead. I left them on the porch and went inside to begin planning my new life. Monday morning arrived gray and damp, but I felt more alive than I had in months. I stood in front of my closet staring at clothes that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. The safe blouses and cardigans I'd worn to dinners and events with Trent felt like costumes from a role I no longer wanted to play. Instead, I chose a navy blue dress I'd bought years earlier, but never worn because Trent said it was too bold for a woman my age. When I looked in the mirror, I realized it wasn't too bold at all. It was exactly right for who I was becoming. The Wellington Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown tower, all glass and steel with views stretching endlessly across the city. As the elevator rose to the 32nd floor, my stomach fluttered with nerves and excitement. Mrs. Hayes, a young woman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile, greeted me as soon as the doors opened. "I'm Sarah Chen, Mr. Wellington's assistant. He's waiting for you in the conference room." I followed her past walls lined with photographs of the Foundation's work: a children's hospital in Guatemala, scholarships for inner-city students, clean water systems in rural villages. Every image told a story of lives changed. Marcus stood by the windows when I entered, hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the city. He turned and smiled warmly. "Claudia, you look wonderful. Ready for your first day?" "As ready as anyone can be when they don't quite know what they're stepping into," I said. He laughed. "I like honesty. Come on, let me show you what we're working with." The next 4 hours passed in a blur. Marcus introduced me to the Foundation staff, 12 dedicated people handling everything from grant reviews to program oversight and finances. They were polite, but I could sense their skepticism about a middle-aged nurse stepping into a senior role. "Our current system is very reactive," explained Janet Morrison, the interim director. "We receive applications, compare them to our criteria, and approve or deny funding. It's efficient, but impersonal," I finished, thinking of hospital administrators who treated patients like file numbers. Janet blinked in surprise, then nodded. "Exactly. We rarely interact with the people we're meant to be helping." "That's what I want to change," Marcus said. "I want us to be more connected to the real impact of our work." Over lunch, the 2 of us sat alone in his office while he shared his vision. My wife used to say charity without relationship is just guilt management, writing checks to ease discomfort without understanding the deeper causes. "She sounds remarkable," I said, thinking of the silver coin now resting on my dresser at home. She was. She grew up with very little, put herself through school, became a social worker. She never let me forget that privilege brings responsibility, and that responsibility without compassion is just bureaucracy. I thought about my own years in nursing, about the times I'd seen people suffer because their needs didn't fit neatly into a system. "What if we started visiting the organizations we fund?" I said. "Not just the large, polished ones, but the small grassroots groups doing real work without the resources to write perfect applications." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Tell me more." "In hospitals," I said, "the programs that get support are often the ones with the best presentation, not the ones doing the most good. I think philanthropy works the same way. What if we went out and found the people who are actually making a difference, but don't have the connections or the polished presentations?" I said. "Field research," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "Direct observation. I like that." We spent the rest of the afternoon mapping out ideas for a more personal, hands-on approach to giving. By the time 5 o'clock came around, I felt like I had stumbled into something I'd been searching for my entire life without realizing it. The rest of the week followed that same rhythm. Every day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new ways of thinking about how resources could be used to create real, lasting change. The staff, who had been cautious around me at first, gradually relaxed as they saw that I respected their experience and wasn't afraid to admit what I didn't know. Friday afternoon was when my old life showed up uninvited. I was in my temporary office reviewing requests for medical equipment funding when Sarah knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Mrs. Hayes, there's a man here asking to see you. He says he's your husband." My stomach tightened. "Thank you, Sarah. Please let him know I'll be right there." Trent was waiting in the reception area, looking uneasy amid the sleek, modern space. He'd clearly dressed for the occasion, wearing his best suit and the tie I'd given him for his last birthday, yet somehow he still looked out of place against the quiet elegance around him. "Hello, Trent," I said evenly. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see where you're working," he replied, his eyes sweeping the room in barely concealed amazement. "Claudia, this place is incredible. How did you even get a job like this?" "I was offered the position," I said simply. "What do you want?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I want to talk about us, about our future." "We don't have a future, Trent. I made that clear." "You're not thinking clearly," he said, slipping into that familiar, patronizing tone I'd endured for years. "You're making decisions based on emotion, not logic." "Am I?" I crossed my arms. "Then what's the logical choice in your opinion?" "Come home. We work through this. Marriage is about forgiveness, about second chances." He gestured around the room. "This job, this whole thing, it's not real. You're just playing a role in someone else's world." Before I could answer, Marcus approached from the elevator area. He took in the scene instantly, my rigid posture, Trent's aggressive stance, the uneasy quiet in the room. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, polite but authoritative enough that Trent instinctively stepped back. "Marcus Wellington," I said, grateful for his timing. "This is my ex-husband, Trent Hayes." "Trent Hayes, this is Mr. Wellington, CEO of Wellington Industries and founder of the foundation." I watched recognition wash over Trent's face. His expression shifted as he tried to process the name. "Mr. Wellington," Trent said, extending his hand with practiced enthusiasm. "It's an honor. What you've built here is impressive." Marcus shook his hand briefly, then turned slightly toward me. "Claudia has been an extraordinary addition to our team. We're very fortunate to have her leading our new community outreach initiative." "Community outreach," Trent repeated, his tone edged with disdain. Claudia always did have a soft spot for lost causes. The words stung, heat rushing to my face. Before I could respond, Marcus spoke calmly. "I've noticed that people who dismiss compassion as weakness are often the ones who've never had the courage to practice it. If you'll excuse us, Claudia and I have a meeting to attend." He placed a gentle hand on my arm and guided me toward the elevators. As we waited, I could feel Trent's stare burning into my back. "This won't last, Claudia," he called out, his voice tight with desperation. "These people don't really know you. When they do, you'll come back." The elevator doors closed, cutting him off. Only then did I realize I was trembling. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked softly. "I think so. I'm sorry. He shouldn't have come here. Don't apologize. But let me ask you something. Is that truly how he sees you? As someone who wastes time on lost causes?" I thought about the years I'd minimized my volunteer work, the way I'd spoken about nursing like it was just a job instead of a calling. All the times I'd apologized for caring too deeply about people Trent considered unimportant. Marcus was quiet as the elevator rose. When he spoke, his voice was reflective. "My wife used to say there are two kinds of people in the world. Those who see suffering and turn away, and those who see suffering and move toward it. She said the first group runs the world, but the second one saves it." As we walked toward his office, he continued, "What your ex-husband calls weakness, I call strength. What he calls naivete, I call courage. He's wrong about you, Claudia, and he's wrong about what truly matters." That evening, I drove home through the glow of city lights, thinking about the week that had just passed. 5 days earlier, I had been a woman discarded, unsure of what came next. Now, I was the director of community outreach for one of the largest charitable foundations in the country, with the freedom to build whatever future I chose. More than that, I was finally in a place where my compassion wasn't something to apologize for, but something to be valued. As I pulled into my driveway that night, I noticed the roses Trent had left on my porch were completely gone now, their dry petals scattered by the wind. But in the garden, the daffodils I'd planted the previous fall were pushing through the soil, bright green shoots reaching for the early spring light. I gathered up the dead roses, tossed them into the trash, and went inside to call my sister in California. For the first time in months, I had good news to share. 6 months later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my new apartment, adjusting the silver necklace that had become my signature. Marcus had given it to me after our first major success at the foundation. The woman staring back at me felt like someone entirely new, compared to the one who had sat shivering on a park bench on Christmas morning. My hair was shorter now, styled to frame my face instead of hiding behind it. I'd learned how to wear makeup in a way that highlighted who I was instead of masking me. My clothes reflected confidence, not a desire to disappear. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It was in my eyes. There was a brightness there that had been missing for years. Today was the launch of our most ambitious project yet, the Second Chances Community Center, built in the very neighborhood where I'd first met Marcus. It felt right to return to the place where both of our lives had quietly shifted direction. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of learning and growth. Our new hands-on approach to philanthropy had transformed the Wellington Foundation. Instead of waiting behind desks for applications, we went directly into communities, searching for people already making a difference without resources or recognition. I'd walked through inner-city schools where teachers paid for supplies out of their own pockets. I'd visited shelters run by volunteers who had once slept on those same floors. I'd met community leaders battling food shortages with neighborhood gardens and local markets. Every visit reinforced the same truth. People are incredibly resilient when someone finally believes in them. Just last week, Marcus had shown me the latest reports. Our impact has increased by 300% since we changed our approach. But more importantly, we're seeing real change in real lives. The grand opening brought everything together. The Second Chances Community Center would offer job training, childcare, counseling, and educational programs all in one place. More than that, it would be a space where dignity and hope were non-negotiable. As I drove to the event, I thought about the difference between this journey and the one I'd taken 6 months earlier. Back then, I was running from heartbreak with nowhere to go. Now, I was moving toward something I'd helped build, something meant to last. The center buzzed with energy when I arrived. News crews set up cameras, community members toured the building, children laughed on the new playground in the courtyard. I spotted Marcus near the entrance speaking with Rosa, the center's director. She'd grown up in the neighborhood, worked her way through college, and returned to give back. When Marcus saw me, his face lit up with that familiar warm smile. "There she is," he said, squeezing my hand, "the woman who made all of this possible." "We did this together," I corrected, though pride warmed my chest. Rosa hugged me tightly. "When you visited our program 6 months ago, we were operating out of a basement with a tiny budget. Now look at this." I looked around at the bright rooms, the computer lab, the childcare area, the meeting spaces. "You were already changing lives, Rosa. We just helped give you room to do it." The dedication ceremony was simple but powerful. Marcus spoke about investing in communities, not just ideas. Rosa talked about how belief can change a person's future. And when it was my turn, I spoke about second chances. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, I said. I thought I was too old, too ordinary, too set in my ways to begin again. But I learned something important. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. As I finished, my eyes caught a familiar figure near the edge of the crowd. Trent stood by the parking lot, half hidden behind a news van. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time, I saw respect there. And maybe regret. Later, as people mingled and children played, I stood in the courtyard garden admiring the vegetables and flowers planted by volunteers. It reminded me of my mother's garden, and the lessons she'd taught me about tending small things patiently. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, joining me with 2 cups of coffee from the center's new cafe. "It's perfect," I replied. "Your wife would have loved this place." Marcus nodded. "She would have loved you too. The way you see possibility where others see obstacles." He hesitated, then continued. "These last 6 months working beside you have been the happiest I've been since Elizabeth passed. You helped me remember there's still hope, still beauty in the world." He set his coffee down and turned to face me, his composure giving way to something more vulnerable. "Claudia, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. I know we work together, and I know you're still healing from your divorce, but I have to ask, would you consider having dinner with me tonight? Not as colleagues, but as something more." My heart skipped. Over the months, I'd noticed the way Marcus looked at me, the way our hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, how our conversations had quietly deepened. I'd told myself it was all in my imagination, that a man like him could never be interested in someone like me. "Marcus," I started, but he gently raised his hand. "Before you answer, there's something I want you to know. That night in the park when you gave me your boots, you saved more than my feet from the cold. You restored my faith in people. You reminded me that there are still those who care more about doing what's right than what's easy." He reached into his jacket and pulled out my old brown boots, the same ones he'd returned months earlier. I've kept these in my car ever since. They remind me of the moment I met the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. I stared at the boots, remembering that snowy night when I thought my life was ending. How could I have known that giving away something so small would open the door to everything I'd never dared to hope for? "Yes," I said softly. "Yes, I'll have dinner with you. I'd like to see where this goes." Then I smiled, feeling nervous and brave all at once. "But one thing, Marcus. I'm keeping the boots this time. They're part of my story now." He laughed and pulled me into a gentle hug that felt like safety and warmth all at once. I wouldn't have it any other way. As afternoon faded into evening and the last visitors left, we found ourselves alone in the garden. City lights shimmered in the distance, but here everything felt calm, alive with possibility. "Can I tell you something?" I asked, resting against his shoulder as we sat on a bench overlooking the garden beds. Of course, 6 months ago, when Trent left, I thought I was being discarded, like something no longer useful. But now I understand. I wasn't being thrown away. I was being set free. Marcus squeezed my hand. "Free to become who you were always meant to be. Free to be with someone who sees me the way you do," I said. "Someone who values kindness over convenience, compassion over comfort." We sat quietly, watching the stars appear as the sky darkened. Somewhere behind us, Rosa was locking up the building, securing the place we'd built together. Proof of second chances made real. "My mother used to say gardens teach us about hope," I said after a while. "You plant seeds without knowing if they'll grow. You care for them through storms and dry seasons. And sometimes if you're patient, you get to see them bloom." Marcus turned to me, his eyes gentle in the twilight. "Is that what this is? What we're building?" I thought about the foundation we'd transformed, the lives touched, the love growing between us, steady and real. "Yes," I said. "I think it is." As we walked back to our cars, Marcus carrying my boots like they were priceless, I realized how wrong Trent had been. He'd said this life wouldn't last, that I'd come back once people saw who I really was. But they did see me. And it turned out I was someone worth believing in, worth investing in, worth loving. Not the woman who made herself smaller to fit into someone else's life, but the woman who gave her boots to a stranger on a snowy night. That woman was who I had been all along. 3 years later, I would stand in that same garden at my wedding reception, surrounded by the community we'd helped grow and the love we'd nurtured together. Marcus would joke in his speech that he proposed to me twice, once as a man asking for help, and once as himself asking for my heart. And both times he'd say, "I gave him exactly what he needed, but I knew the truth. In giving him what he needed, I finally found what I needed too. Not someone to complete me, but someone to grow beside me. Not someone to take care of me, but someone who cherished the way I cared for others." The silver coin from Marcus's wife still rests on my dresser, its words a daily reminder. Kindness is the only investment that never fails. Looking back, I see how every act of kindness returned to me, multiplied into something more beautiful than I ever imagined. Sometimes the end of one story is the beginning of another. Sometimes the hardest day becomes the first real day of your life, and sometimes, if you're brave enough, giving away your boots to a stranger in the snow leads you exactly where you belong. Now I'm curious about you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. And on the final screen, I'm leaving 2 more channel favorites that might surprise you. Thank you for staying with my story until the end.